thank you very much for coming today. This is my first time in Berlin, and I just got in last night, so I'm looking forward to exploring it a bit. My name is Daniel Padgett, and I'm the head of conversation design at Google. Thank you very much for the introduction, by the way. It really is a pleasure to be with you today. It happens to be the 4th of July, and that means something in the United States. Any Americans in the audience? Oh, several of you. We should probably meet up later and eat too much food and drink too much beer and blow stuff up. That's what Americans do, I think. Anyway, just kidding. Anyway, back to conversation design and my role at Google. I have to say, I'm really proud to be part of such a diverse team at a time like this. We're a group of linguists, cognitive scientists, musicians, creative writers, and interaction designers. And we're really hyper-focused on creating a new discipline and new interaction models for what's emerging today, a new hardware and software ecosystem that's supporting increasingly personal, ambient, and natural user experiences. Not working. Can we get the... We mix a bit of art and science, and we do our best to really put people at the center. We borrow really heavily from what we know about human communication, human language, sociolinguistic behaviors, and we're modeling conversational interactions that work dynamically on everything from a smart speaker that is voice only, to a smart display that is a little bit glanceable and might be on your counter, all the way to something like a TV, which is a bit more far-field. Borrowing a bit from Douglas Rushkoff at Team Human, I don't know if anybody knows of that team, we're really aiming to optimize technology for a human future. That's kind of the motto that we've adopted. Now, I don't think it's too controversial. In the intro, we heard a little bit about this. We're clearly at the beginning of a massive technological shift. And we're rapidly moving away from a paradigm that required humans to learn how to interact with machines toward a paradigm where advances in natural language understanding, machine perception, computer vision, and more are completely flipping the script. They're enabling human-computer interactions that feel more natural, more intuitive, and more human. So I want to talk about that shift today, and I want to talk about how conversational user interfaces have been kind of leading the way, driving the adoption of these machine-learned technologies, and talk to you a little bit about why I think that's happening. And then I want to share some examples that I'm seeing in the real world out there in the market, and hoping it will inspire and give people ideas for makers and creatives like yourselves. So anyway, let's talk about this shift and the role that conversation and conversational user interfaces have played in adoption. In 2011, Apple introduced Siri to the world. They launched it on iPhone. Was that the first conversational user interface? No. But it was the first that was right there in your pocket. And it was also backed by a massively popular platform. And it focused squarely on the consumer. And it was a really pivotal moment for this technology. And 3 years later, Baidu reported that they received 10% of their queries through voice. That's massive volume given their user base. In 2015, our friends from Apple came back, and they reported that they were receiving 1 billion queries through Siri per week. Pretty impressive. Kind of stealing their thunder, that same year, Amazon launched Alexa, and they put out Echo, the device, that voice-only device that posted sales numbers that made it the fastest-selling speaker on the market. They sold a ton of those things. People put them in their kitchens and their living rooms, and Amazon showed that there was an appetite to skip the mobile phone altogether in certain contexts and get answers to questions and take quick actions via voice. So, frankly, credit where credit is due. Yes, I'm from Google, but they kind of nailed that one. In 2016, continuing the trend, Microsoft reported that 25% of their searches on Windows 10 taskbar were done through voice, and Google reported similarly that 20% of searches on their mobile app in the US were coming through voice. And Google's volume on mobile app in the US is very, very large. That's a pretty impressive number. And that continues to grow. Later that year, Google launched Google Assistant. Happens to be a product that a good portion of my team works on. It's a conversational experience that now spans an ecosystem that includes smart speakers, mobile phones, smart displays, automobiles, and more. And we saw some really rapid growth. And actually, just recently, it was announced that we're probably going to hit Google Assistant-enabled devices is going to reach 1 billion devices in the relative short term. So the big question is why? Why now? Why this shift? There certainly was a convergence that took place where the technology reached a certain quality bar, and that has a lot to do with the capabilities of machine learning driving these things. The necessary hardware became available, the components, and they were cheap enough, and everything worked over the networks that we had, so we didn't have latency and those sorts of things. But these things all translate to some serious user benefit. These machine learned technologies and the advancements in that hardware enabled speed, simplicity, and ubiquity. That meant that users could get to actions and answers more quickly and more easily than the dominant paradigm, mobile. And they could do it from more touch points. So first, let's talk about speed. We live in an on-demand world. People want things, and they want them fast. Their favorite song, podcast, a quick answer. And honestly, I can't think of any interaction mode that gets me what I need more quickly than a well-designed conversational interface. There's just very little friction. Let's do a really quick thought experiment. If you have a mobile phone, actually, how many of you have mobile phones? 100% of you should be ready. Really? No. There's this game, how many taps? How many taps does it take? Take out your phone and even just a thought experiment. How many taps would it take you to get an answer to that question? I think I did it this morning. It was like, 22 taps or something like that. How about play the latest album by Gorillaz on Spotify? You gotta open it. You gotta find Spotify or whatever your music provider is. If it's not in a saved list, you gotta type it. How about something a little bit more complex? Any direct flights to London next Sunday? The complexity of these queries actually increases, right? These get more and more complex as we go deeper. But the time it takes to complete them is actually about the same. If I said, hey Google, what's 15 times 24? Instant answer. Play the latest album by Gorillaz on Spotify. It's playing in about a second. Any direct flights to London next Sunday, it has an answer for me and tells me how much it is and how long my flight is. That's pretty good stuff. Now, I know, of course, that there are certain contexts where this just doesn't work out. People don't want to leverage voice. There's also text, though, if you want, if that's the access that you have. But in the home, in the car, on the go with headphones, this is pretty compelling. Now, let's talk about simplicity. The beauty of a conversational interface is that users already know how to use it. There's really nothing to teach. That's because we're bringing roughly 150,000 years of language evolution to these interactions. Perhaps more. Scholars kind of debate about this. There's people who are putting it at 500,000 years. Pretty interesting. Anyway, it's just that human communication, human language is just so fine-tuned and so efficient. It's really powerful. I mean, let's just take a look at this example. This simple exchange, or what looks very simple, this is 10 words between two people. Margaret on the left, I need a drink. Laura on the right, I hear the Eagles good. What's happening here? I need a drink. Has Margaret had a good day or a bad day? Probably a bad day. Does she want a glass of water or a cocktail? Anyone? Cocktail. When does she want to drink it? Now. All right, let's move over to Laura. I hear the Eagle's good. Has Laura been to the Eagle? No, doesn't sound like it because she hears that it's good. Does the Eagle serve alcohol? Probably, or she's not being a very good friend. Is it close by? I would hope so. Accessible. The other thing, is it open? We also hope so. Maybe she doesn't know because she's never been there. 10 words. And all of those questions were answered. Or, for the most part. Maybe some assumptions were made. But all of those things were answered. And all of that context was shared. It's amazing what humans can do with language. And now, if you think that we don't really bring any of that to the table when we're interacting with machines through a language interface, you'd actually be mistaken. As a matter of fact, Stanford researchers, Nass and Brave, showed that we just can't help it. We're absolutely 100% wired for speech. When you hear a voice, you bring all of that language evolution with you, and you interact with it the same way that you would interact with humans. That's why when, it's like you just don't get the answer right at the right moment, you think something's off. You think it's weird. People tend to respond when they're in a cooperative conversation, like within 600 milliseconds of being asked a question, if they're certain. And so they even showed in one really interesting study that unconsciously we assign a personality to any voice, even a machine-generated voice. And we do this in under a second. We assign gender, we assign age, we assign register. We're basically painting a picture in our minds of who the person is, where they're from, and more. Now again, we're just wired for this, which makes conversational interactions feel so seamless, so natural, and so simple. And finally, thank you for the water, I appreciate it. There's ubiquity. The barrier to entry here is really quite low. I mean, let's think about it. For now, you need at least one of these tools to engage in a conversation with a machine, a microphone or a keyboard. Yes, there are people who are working on other input modes for people, for instance, who need to sign. It's really amazing stuff. But for now, a microphone or a keyboard. Let's set aside, for instance, or for now, things like laptops, smartwatches, so on and so forth, and just focus on mobile. 9 billion phones in the world, 8 billion people. So it's a pretty safe bet that if you're a human, you have access to a microphone, a keyboard, or both. It could be a T9 keyboard on a flip phone. It could be a QWERTY keyboard on a smartphone or a microphone on a feature phone. The point is that there's really strong distribution here, which is good for this, right? But there's more to it than just the distribution. Many people don't have smartphones, an app ecosystem, or unlimited data. They use flip phones, feature phones. They leverage cellular for voice and SMS, and that has tons of limitations. But not anymore. These technologies that we're talking about, these conversational technologies, they provide access. They provide access on any device, on any network. They have the potential to be true universal gateways to the world's information and services. And if you ask me, that's pretty powerful stuff. Now, with just the 3 minutes we have left, I'm going to run through some stuff that I'm seeing out there, and hopefully it will spur some people on to ideas and makers into making some cool stuff. First, let's get creative. There's a whole lot of stuff that's going on in arts entertainment, or that can go on in arts and entertainment. Possible to interact with your favorite characters, to play interactive games and go deep on stories and maybe even kind of choose your own adventure. Perhaps it can help you teach, it can teach you a new instrument, new skill. There's even some really interesting stuff that's going on with respect to co-performance and co-creation. In fact, some guy at Google fed an AI a bunch of sci-fi movie scripts, and then the AI spit out a new movie script, and then they filmed it, and it was really weird, but kind of cool. Look it up. It's really interesting. It's like 20 minutes, and it's a very weird sci-fi thing. Let's talk about education. I think there's a lot of opportunity to augment the learning process. Help with homework. If you're learning a new language, help with grammar or with teaching you the new language. Things like flashcards and help with, the spelling bee for kids. A how-to, step-by-step process for fixing your bike, right? Or, fixing a leaky faucet. Retail and commerce. This gets really interesting. So there's the obvious. With the distribution and the access that we're talking about, leveraging conversational technologies gives sellers more buyers and buyers more sellers. I actually have a story about that. I used Google Translate in Japan. I do not speak a lick of Japanese, and the people in the store did not speak any English. Glasses, I have many of them. A friend sent me to this store, and I used the Google Translate app, and I had a back-and-back conversation with the salesperson for about 45 minutes. I bought 3 pairs. We went through a whole adjustment exercise, all using a Google Translate app, conversational technologies at work in the real world. I would have walked out otherwise. I wouldn't have got the glasses that I like so much. I don't know if you think they look good. The other thing is that there's some real opportunity for direct marketing here to drive awareness, improve engagement, and increase sales. There's precedent here. Well-designed chatbots are being leveraged to drive real business benefit, and they're outpacing even some of their traditional counterparts. So one company I watch out in the world, they've been working with beauty brands, and according to the case studies that they've got, they're seeing engagement that's 27 times higher than email marketing that they've been doing. With another bot, they're seeing 51% click-through rate on some coupons that they're providing during the interaction. And with both, they're seeing these massively high satisfaction rates, like over 90%. Really impressive stuff. And they're collecting really interesting data about how people are using these things. Lastly, healthcare, and I've got about 30 seconds. Try to do this real quick. I'm actually really excited about this. There's a lot that can be done, just for some of the day-to-day tasks. Managing treatment, so helping people stay on top of medications, therapy, helping them get better. People forget, right? And we can help remind them. They can be having appointments with their doctor, setting appointments. They can be having exchanges with those folks. And in the hospital, we have those red buttons, when you're at the bedside red button. But think about how cool it would be if you could just say your request, that would be transferred on to the nurse on the floor, and they could come in with the thing instead of having to walk in, how can I help you figure it out, and go do it. They could already have that information by the time they enter the room. That opens them up to more. They can help more people. Lastly, this is actually aimed at the elderly population. It's exploding around the world. And I mentioned Japan before. The number of Japanese people ages 65 years or older nearly quadrupled in the last 40 years. And by 2060, it's going to be 40% of the population. This is actually a problem because they don't have enough caregivers. So these technologies can serve this community, can help as a memory aid. I can tell it something and ask for that information back. This is has been amazing with Alzheimer's patients, by the way. It gives them more independence, right? As people and researchers have been testing these things, they've been talking about how they feel like, I don't have to rely on my caregiver so much. I don't feel like a burden. I can get the information, the services I need in my own time without having to bother someone else. And also, perhaps a little somewhat controversial, is companionship. But these people, maybe they don't have family anymore. And talking with something really helps them. They report that they enjoy conversing with these machines, getting information, getting the latest news. It's that kind of human touch from the technology that they're getting that is really driving benefit. And with that, some resources. Take a picture real quick if you want. Sorry I rushed through that last bit. And thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
That was amazing, Daniel. I've got 2 kids, and small kids. I started late, and I'm terrified by screens, even though I've been in technology forever. I'm a believer that the voice user interface can save us from some of the damage of excessive exposure to screens. Are you a believer in that?
I'm a 100% believer in that. I talk about it a lot, actually. I think that these technologies allow us, like you said in the beginning, to push things into the background. And so technology is there when we need it. We can go to it when we need it. We don't feel that burning, like the phone's burning in your pocket and you have to check it.
Yeah.
I, frankly, have started to move toward wearables and hearables myself to get myself out of the screen, and it's been very successful. Like I literally, I have a smartwatch where I'm doing messaging and calls and searches that I need to do, but I'm not going deep on social or news or things like that. And it's a conscious effort, and these technologies have really helped in that regard.
Very, very healthy. Let's take one of these questions from the audience. The one at the top there, without visual cues, how do you make users remember to actually use voice in the right moments?
Sure. Well, so discovery is an interesting challenge in a medium that is so ephemeral and linear. Like, as soon as you say it, it's gone, and we have short-term memory. So what we do is we try to provide guidance. When people try an action or get an answer, when they first start using the product, what we'll try to do is something that we call like a by the way. And we'll give them a hint about the types of things they could do or how they could do this quicker next time. And we'll do that several times before just cutting it off entirely, hoping that they've learned by that point.
Okay, and really quickly, because I don't want to discourage people from asking questions, let's get one more in. Interaction becomes the brand. Oh, it's jumping up there. How can you differentiate from other voice assistants like Siri to strengthen the Google brand?
Well, I think Google's superpower is its technology and like the quality and the performance. I can't go into detail there, but I definitely think that we're positioned very nicely from a quality of the technology perspective to push past some of our competitors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big warm round of applause for Daniel Padgett.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.